Canada's new trade deal with the U.S. and Mexico has been under intense scrutiny since Sunday night when negotiators reached an agreement just under the wire. Concessions were made, the most obvious adversely affect Canada's dairy farmers. But Canada also may have given up something else, a chance of a free trade deal with the world's second largest economy.
What if your country's biggest trade partner decided to play hardball? For Canada, U.S. trade tariffs became a wake-up call, forcing them to pivot to China, creating a shift in global energy power nobody expected. What happens when the U.S., your biggest customer, decides to push you around? Canada found out the hard way, and the result was a total game change. But before we move forward, I would invite you to like the video and subscribe to the channel.
One expert I spoke with today who at one time was advising Prime Minister Justin Trudeau described this move as extraordinary, saying that this clearly is a concession that Canada was prepared to make to the United States because, of course, Donald Trump has made China his biggest trade target. It is no secret he does not like the way that China does trade. And today his top advisors were out speaking to the media saying that this new agreement, the USMCA, is also, in addition to keeping trade going through North America, it's also meant to send a signal to China to start behaving itself.
For decades, Canada's energy strategy could be summed up in 3 words: send it south. Nearly every barrel of oil pumped out of Alberta's sands flowed straight across the border into American refineries. Canada held the title of the largest foreign oil supplier to the U.S., and for years, it seemed like a perfect relationship. The U.S. got reliable energy, and Canada cashed the checks. But here's the thing: when you put all your eggs in one basket, you hand the basket holder a lot of power. Washington knew this, and they weren't shy about flexing that power when it suited them. Enter the late 2010s, a period that made Canada question everything about its energy dependency on the U.S. Picture this: the North American Free Trade Agreement was up for renegotiation under the Trump administration, and things were looking shaky. Canada relied heavily on NAFTA to ensure smooth trade, but suddenly the rug was pulled out from under them. Trump's America First mantra translated into sweeping tariffs, and Canada got caught in the crossfire. Among these was a harsh 25% tariff on steel imports imposed in 2018, which sent shockwaves through Canada's energy industry. Why? Because steel is the backbone of the oil sector, from building pipelines to constructing rigs. When the price of steel skyrocketed, so did the costs for Canadian producers. It wasn't a gentle nudge, it was a punch in the ribs that knocked the wind out of Canada's energy strategy. This wasn't just a financial hit, it was a wake-up call. Canada realized that its reliance on the U.S. as its sole customer wasn't just risky, it was downright dangerous. Every time the U.S. made a policy move, it felt like Ottawa was holding its breath, hoping the impact wouldn't be too severe. But after the steel tariff, hope wasn't enough anymore. Canada had to rethink its entire game plan. Here's where things get interesting. In the middle of this economic arm wrestling, Canada set its sights somewhere else: Asia. At the heart of this strategy was the expansion of the Trans Mountain Pipeline, which increased Canada's capacity to ship oil to markets outside the U.S. Originally designed to transport 300,000 barrels per day, the pipeline's expansion boosted that number to a massive 890,000 barrels daily. The core goal: give Canadian oil producers direct access to Asian markets, reducing their reliance on a single buyer. This wasn't some pie-in-the-sky idea either. When you're losing millions to tariffs and navigating non-stop trade drama, diversification stops being optional. It becomes survival. The Trans Mountain expansion wasn't just about survival, though. It was a calculated power move, and one of the major beneficiaries of Canada's new energy direction was, wait for it, China. You almost have to laugh at the irony. While the U.S. was busy flexing its trade muscles and threatening its allies with steel and aluminum tariffs, China stood patiently on the sidelines, ready to swoop in. For Beijing, it wasn't exactly a hard sell. Canada needed a new trading partner, and China was more than happy to fill the gap. The U.S., without even realizing it, had essentially delivered Canada right to China's doorstep. Now, let's talk numbers. Canada shipped about 207,000 barrels of oil per day to China as of the latest data, and that number is climbing. Why? Simple. China, as the world's largest energy consumer, craves stability in its supply chain, and Canadian oil gives them exactly that. Unlike Middle Eastern crude, which comes with the baggage of geopolitical conflicts and choke points like the Strait of Hormuz, Canadian oil is shipped directly across the Pacific. And get this, it's cheaper. Canadian crude typically sells sells at a discount of $4 to $6 per barrel compared to other suppliers. For China, that's like finding oil on sale while everyone else is paying full price. Here's where the real twist comes in. This isn't just about barrels of oil changing hands, it's about leverage. Canada's pivot gave it a bargaining chip it never had before. By expanding into Asian markets, Ottawa made it clear to Washington, we don't need to play by your rules anymore. And just like that, Canada went from being a player stuck in the US's orbit to a power that could stand on its own 2 feet. But this isn't just a win for Canada, it's a massive score for China. Beijing now has a direct line to millions of barrels of oil without worrying about OPEC politics or US interference. Meanwhile, the US is left scrambling to figure out how it lost control over its neighbors' energy resources. If you think about it, this isn't just a story about tariffs or pipelines. It's a story about how one decision, one 25% steel tariff, triggered a ripple effect that shifted global power dynamics. When Canada decided to break free from America's grip, it sent a message. It's not business as usual anymore, but the plot thickens. The US may have underestimated just how much their actions would push Canada into China's arms. This isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning. How Beijing benefits and why Washington is panicking is coming up next. Stay tuned. Did you know that Canada ships so much oil to China every single day that it could fuel an entire city like Vancouver? And the kicker, China doesn't just get it gets it cheap. We're talking discounts so hefty you'd think Canada was running a Black Friday sale just for Beijing. Right now, Canada sends about 207,000 barrels of oil every day to China, and that number is only going up. China's appetite for oil is massive. It's the world's largest energy consumer. But more importantly, it's not just about how much oil they're getting. It's about how cheap they're getting it. Canadian crude sells for $4 to $6 less per barrel compared to oil from places like Saudi Arabia. For a country like China, which imports around 10 million barrels daily overall, those savings add up fast. Imagine getting billions of dollars in your energy budget back every year just because your supplier decided to offer you a better deal. That's the kind of bargain China's getting, and Canada's the one handing it over. But this isn't just about money. There's a bigger game at play here. Strategy. Most of the world's oil has to come through choke points, like the Strait of Hormuz, which, let's not forget, the US has essentially turned into its own heavily militarized toll road. It's like the US is standing there, clipboard in hand, monitoring everything that comes through. That's risky for a country like China, which has no interest in being at the mercy of American-controlled shipping lanes. But Canadian oil? That comes straight across the Pacific. No drama, no middleman, and no US hovering over the shipping routes. For China, it's stability and freedom all rolled into one delicious barrel of crude. Now, Canada wasn't always in the business of selling oil to China. Remember, for decades, nearly every drop of Canadian oil flowed south to the US. It was convenient, easy, and at the time, profitable enough. But as we just talked about, that relationship hit a sour note when the US started messing around with tariffs during the NAFTA renegotiations. Canada realized it needed a plan B, and that's where the Trans Mountain Pipeline came into play. The expansion of the Trans Mountain Pipeline was a game changer for Canada's energy strategy. Originally, it could move around 300,000 barrels of oil a day. With expansions, that capacity has ballooned to 890,000 barrels daily. You know what that means? It means Canada now has a direct energy superhighway that runs right past the grasp of the US and straight into Asian markets. Who's waiting at the end of that pipeline? China. It's like this pipeline was custom built to send Canadian oil directly to Beijing with a big sign that says, "Here's your energy lifeline, discounted." But the partnership between Canada and China doesn't just stop at oil. This is where things get even more interesting. China isn't just buying Canada's oil, it's investing in Canada's energy infrastructure. Case in point, China is heavily involved in Canada's LNG, liquefied natural gas projects, including putting billions into the $40 billion LNG Canada project. That's a huge signal. It tells you that this is more than just a short-term energy trading relationship. It's a long-term alignment. China is essentially saying, we're here to stay. And Canada? Well, they don't seem in much of a rush to say no. For Canada, this kind of investment acts like insurance. The US has proven that it's not always the most predictable energy partner. Something about tariffs and America First policies tends to do that. But with China pouring billions into projects like LNG Canada, Canada has a financial and strategic buffer. If Washington decides to pull any more trade shenanigans, Ottawa has Beijing in its corner, ready to keep the money flowing. Meanwhile, the US is starting to notice, and it's not thrilled. Lawmakers in Washington are quietly raising eyebrows at Canada's growing ties with China, questioning whether it's appropriate for a NATO ally to be assisting Beijing with its energy needs. And it's not just politicians, it's military strategists too. If you're sitting in the Pentagon watching a NATO partner like Canada help China bypass the Strait of Hormuz and secure energy independence from OPEC, you're probably feeling a bit uneasy. It's not just oil on the line here, it's influence. The U.S. has long used energy dominance as one of its biggest geopolitical tools by essentially controlling access to oil through choke points like the Strait of Hormuz and maintaining influence over allied energy markets. Washington has been able to extend its power far beyond its borders. But now one of its closest allies, Canada, is giving China a way out. And that doesn't just weaken U.S. control over oil markets, it shakes the very foundation of how America wields power on the global stage. And let's not downplay how smart this move is for China. Not only do they get cheap, reliable Canadian oil, but they're investing in infrastructure that locks down their energy security for decades. They're playing the long game, securing both the resources and the shipping routes they need to keep their economy running, no matter what happens elsewhere in the world. In the meantime, the U.S. is stuck asking itself how it let this happen. So where does this leave us? Simple. China walks away with the energy deal of the decade. Cheaper oil, safer supply chains, and a massive strategic advantage. Canada gains leverage and economic stability in the face of unpredictable U.S. actions. And the U.S.? Well, they're scrambling to figure out how they lost their grip on Canada, North America's energy crown jewel. But here's what you really need to think about. This isn't just about Canada selling oil to China. This is a shift in global power dynamics. And it's happening quietly, right under the U.S.'s nose. What does this mean for the future? You'll want to hear more in the conclusion because this story isn't over. Not even close. Canada's quiet shift toward China isn't just about selling barrels of oil. It's a move that's rewriting the balance of power in North America. By expanding trade routes to Asia, Canada has weakened its dependence on the U.S., all while helping China secure stable, discounted energy. This isn't just economics, it's a geopolitical curveball that traditional players didn't see coming. So here's the question for you. Did Canada make a smart move, or did it risk too much by aligning with China? Let us know in the comments. And here's the bigger thought. What other global shifts are happening that we're too distracted to notice? That's all for today. Make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel.